What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 1 of Cheap Pop. My name is Laurence, and I am joined here with the former X Division champion. You can see him on Impact, soon to be TNA in January, and pretty much every independent working today. Speedball Mike Bailey. Speedball, how are you doing today?
Hello, I am doing great. Thank you for having me. I don't know if this was, I didn't even know this was the actual theme of the show.
Yeah.
But I do have some Diet Dr. Pepper with me, which was not recommended. It just happened upon a can of soda. And I can drink it ASMR style into the mic too. Should be very appropriate.
Honestly, low-key, this is just a trick to get that big soda money.
Well, I hope it works. Is
Yeah.
there a specific brand you'd like to convince to do a sponsorship?
Whoever gives me the most money is the general idea. Will
So
be the one
I
that
think
tastes the best.
that's probably Coca-Cola. Like Coca-Cola can offer you the
Yeah.
most money. However, RC Cola I think is like probably more likely to happen.
Yeah, I feel that. Like, it'd be funny if we just talked 3 hours about Coca-Cola and sponsorship.
What are your favorite Coca-Cola products? Also, why is Dasani water superior to all other bottled brands?
Are you out of your mind? It is. That's river water. They sell us at like 3 times the price. But yes, welcome to Cheap Pop, the podcast that's kind of about wrestling, but not really, and the things wrestlers and people in the wrestling community love most outside of wrestling. Today, we are talking the entertainment monolith, the thing that for years, especially if you grew up in the 90s, like Mike and I did, had like a stranglehold on television and pop culture. To this day, probably the one television thing that has probably covered every subject, and that is The Simpsons. So, and then people who know you definitely love The Simpsons. It's one of the things that make you happiest. When was the earliest time you remember watching The Simpsons?
So I don't even remember when I started watching it, but I do remember coming home from school for most of my childhood and having four episodes of The Simpsons to watch in a row, because it would be back-to-back episodes in English and then one episode in French and then another one in English on a different channel, and then they'd be on again at 9 in French. So I would watch oftentimes the same episodes in 2 different languages in one day.
That was literally going to be my next question. Is we're both also from Quebec, so oftentimes, and you've mentioned it before, the English and French versions are sometimes radically different from each other in different shows. Like some shows in English and French are completely different. What was the experience of watching in both in English and in French, the same episodes?
Oh man, if you would like to do an entire podcast series about the way shows are dubbed in Quebec, especially cartoons, because it's especially outrageous. And I feel like from this we're gonna pivot to King of the Hill, which I don't know how much Henri pis sa gang you watched. But I do think it's honestly a great language learning tool to be watching shows in both languages, especially something like The Simpsons, which you can watch the same episode 1,000 times and it just gets funnier. You pick up on a little detail every time. But getting to watch it in French and English, because English is not my first language, right? French is. Yeah. I couldn't speak English until I was probably 13, 14. Could I speak English fluently without making too many grammatical errors? But The Simpsons and video games was a big part of me fully learning the language, and the fact that you already kind of know the words to the episode and you're watching it in a different language, I think is super helpful. In fact, right now I would really love to be able to access some Simpsons in Japanese.
Oh, did you feel like the jokes translated the same between both languages, or between French and English? Did you feel like the jokes work the same, or did you find different stuff in French that you didn't notice in English? Or
So a lot of the pop culture references they try to adapt,
Yeah.
and like I am not, or I did not know many like Quebec celebrities, but I also didn't know the English celebrities that they were referencing in The Simpsons. So, I mean, it's all the same. There's some jokes that they just cut out, like one that I can remember off the top of my head is when Ralph is trying to date Lisa
Yeah.
and he gives her a Malibu. He gives her tickets to Krusty,
Yeah.
and there's a note that says the tickets are in the trunk, and then Lisa says it must mean trunk. And in French, it's just the note says tickets are in the trunk. So the other part of the present is in the trunk or something, and Lisa just goes, "I wonder what that could be," and they just like literally cut out a joke because they probably couldn't think of a translation, which is fair.
So, do you have any favorite Simpsons episodes off the top of your head that like stuck with you throughout time, or like stuff when you're like rewatching it now, or like happen upon it that you're like, oh man, this is really great?
The 22 short stories about Springfield
Yeah.
really stands out as one of the most like. It's a weird concept episode and it works great. With a ton of Pulp Fiction references, and I know I certainly watched that episode before I ever knew what Pulp Fiction was. But also, Bart's Comet is my favorite episode, and I even had a move named after it that I've since stopped doing fully. But Bart's Comet, because it has the most important lesson about the importance of being aware of your own mortality and how it literally brings a whole community together in that episode, which is why it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. I was actually going to mention that you did use have a Simpsons reference built in your move set. Like, when did you decide like I wanted to name this the Bart's Comet, and when did you like when you're like thinking up names for moves and stuff, like like how do you go through like a list of like I might want to do a reference to something here?
So I started naming it Bart's Comet because I got asked a bunch of time what my favorite Simpsons episode was on podcasts and interviews and such, because I do reference the Simpsons quite a lot, and I wanted to like make that officially part of my moveset. Do you know what I mean? So I thought it made the transition kind of well. I also just like the name. It does sound like a move, Bart's Comet. But the process of naming moves is always a weird one, because the move that you name can't already be a thing.
Yeah.
Like when I'm talking about my moves to other wrestlers, a lot of the times I just end up referring to them by a vague description, right? My finisher is Ultimate Weapon, but when I talk about it with people, most of the time I just call it Shooting Star Knee Drop.
Yeah.
But you also need a name that isn't like Speedball Driver or whatever would be super lame.
Yeah.
It needs to be something that has a good story behind it and a good explanation of why it's named that.
Yeah, like when the like moonsault to the outside used to always change the name every time. Like every time somebody would put like I call it this on Twitter.
Yeah, that was the running joke, which still is. I just haven't had any good footage to do it in a while. The springboard moonsault over the baseball slide, which I would just call, and then usually it was whatever song I had been listening to or album. The last time I think was Everywhere in His Nasty Parlor Tricks, which is a Modest Mouse album that I had been listening to.
Now, something that like I was talking about, it's like very important to Simpsons fans is which one of your favorite like who are your all-time favorite characters?
Hans Moleman, I think, is the funniest. Like straight up joke for joke, I think Hans Moleman really gets the trophy. But Barney is my favorite character because he has the most. He's the most complex, I think, and has the most complex backstory. And his character is he's an alcoholic, right? He's the lovable drunk, which is actually a pretty sad thing, especially given that whenever he's able to stay sober, he achieves great things consistently, and that's one of my favorite running jokes. How he becomes an astronaut or is a great like opera singer.
Yeah,
he can pilot a helicopter. He ran a highly successful snow removal business, Just if you could stay clean and stay focused for a minute.
Yeah, like personally, like uh, I love every one of the Phil Hartman characters. Like especially early on in that series, like one of the great voice actors, and having probably one of the greatest songs in Simpsons history in Monorail, written by Conan O'Brien. Like that Monorail song, like if people for some reason haven't heard it or that episode too, which like still rings true today of like somebody swindling a town with like fake promise of a technological advance or let's say a space program that they have the government pay for.
Oh man, since this is kind of a wrestling
Yeah.
show, we might as well pivot to how many fucking Lyle Landleys there actually are in professional wrestling and how that happens all the time, where some promoter will essentially try to sell the wrestling community on a monorail.
Yeah.
It's a very common occurrence.
Like at least they can give you a song and like a literal song and dance when they do it.
If only.
Yeah.
Like I've been around wrestling for quite a while, so I generally have a pretty good radar for what's a scam, right? I know right away. And I don't like I haven't gotten scammed by a promoter in a very long time. But I would be more likely to give in to the scam if they at least wrote a song about it.
Yeah. I mean, you at least put in the effort
Right?
at the end of the day. So, I'm wondering, who do you feel in the, like, since it is technically a wrestling podcast, who do you think in the history of The Simpsons is probably the biggest heel or one of the biggest baby faces? Like, one of the, like, true good guys throughout. And, like, who do you think, like, even if it's, most people would pivot to, like, Montgomery Burns, but, like, who'd you, like, think is one of the, like, maybe unsung people that is, like, a villain throughout the series?
I think Helen Lovejoy is underrated as a villain, and I think what she represents in society is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fundamentally religious, trying to stop everyone from having fun in the name of safety. I think Helen Lovejoy really needs to be more highlighted as a villain, and the kind of villainry that she brings is especially devilish. In terms of baby faces, I think. Oh man, I think. I don't know. That's a difficult one, right?
Yeah.
Because one of the tricky things about The Simpsons is that no character is fundamentally good.
Yeah.
Everyone is flawed, and that's what makes it an exciting universe. But like, I don't know, man. Ned Flanders, I think.
Yeah.
Is the funny thing about it is it works on several levels because he's painted as like this guy is so good that we all fucking hate him, but also he is good. Do you know what I mean? And everyone kind of treats him like an asshole because of how good he is, but really, he's a legitimately good person.
Yeah, like I would probably go on with a Barney. Or like a Mo 2 is also like underrated as just not being just like somebody who's just had bad things happen to him throughout.
So Mo is hard because he does have a lot of terrible things happen to him, but he's like he a lot of it he does to himself, I find.
Yeah.
Mo kind of leans way too hard into the fact that no one likes him, and I think we all know people like that kind of are always on the defensive because they assume that people are always coming after them.
Yeah. If you could have a match with one Simpsons character, like right now, if one Simpsons character came out into the, like they've done episodes before, into the real life universe, and you're like, this dude would make a great wrestler, I would like to go one-on-one with this person, who would it be?
Well, Groundskeeper Willie, no doubt.
Oh.
So not only because he has, the most compelling physique out of any wrestler, but we've seen him fight wolves and the like. We know he can go. So at least he has some credibility there. But also, I just want the promos. I just want the pre-match hype-up promos. We lost Roddy Piper,
Yeah.
right? Which was one of the greatest promos of all time. And I could see Groundskeeper Willie just breaking a beer bottle over his own head to hype up a match.
Well, what match would it be? What kind of stipulation would you put on the match?
Well, there would have to be that progression, right? To
Yeah.
him, just starting out as a groundskeeper and then moving forward. But, I think I don't know if it would be directly a false count anywhere, but, there would needs to be weapons involved so that he could bring his groundskeeping skills into the match.
I think like Groundskeeper Willie could easily be a deathmatch legend fairly quickly.
I think Groundskeeper Willie with the Weed Whacker and other Groundskeeper Willie in GCW trying to run over someone with his lawnmower, I think would be.
Not a wrestling podcast?
No, this is a Simpsons podcast.
Oh, okay.
Vaguely about wrestling. Hi, Veda, by the
Hi,
way.
Veda. It
I
is.
just popped in to ask, is this not a wrestling podcast? Because all
I
I
mean-
heard is Simpsons.
In theory, yes, but not really.
Right? It's a
Yeah.
pop culture podcast.
Podcast, yeah.
Tangentially related to professional wrestling, which
Exactly.
everything is.
Monorail thing, though, was good.
Monorail thing was good. Thank you, Veda.
Yeah. If you could be personally in an episode of The Simpsons, like, what did you think? Like, if you had to cast Speedball Mike Bailey in an episode of The Simpsons, what do you think the episode is going to be about? And like, who would you want to interact with in that episode?
I would have to be very wary because no one wants another Lisa Goes Gaga,
Yeah.
right? That would just be bad news for everyone. But I think Bart training to become a pro wrestler would be very interesting. So this is my whole premise, right? When it comes to nearly all media in the Speedyverse, that's a trademark term, about professional wrestling, is that I like to pull back the curtain on professional wrestling, right? And if someone is listening to this and you're not familiar with what I do in the kind of content, my whole premise is that I believe professional wrestling would be a lot more interesting if we didn't pretend. If we didn't act like we needed to pretend that it was real and just accepted the fact that it's all fake and scripted and kind of dumb and the same kind of media as everything else. But I think a Simpsons episode about what pro wrestling really is and the amount of depth that goes into creating it would be very interesting.
Yeah, like, I think I love how naturally you're just like, oh yes, I'd be teaching a seminar to Bart.
Right?
Yeah, just immediately. And he will go on to be a great wrestler throughout. No, like, that I think is the, like, ultimate natural thing. For you, like, you don't, like, would you want to be, like, a recurring character, too, throughout the series? Or would you be, like, one-off, like, Bret Hart, where he just, like, shows up in his mansion?
I wouldn't want to be... So Bret Hart was just one punchline.
Yeah.
I would like to be more of a Hank Scorpio or a Frank Grimes, or at
Yeah.
least get my full episode. But I can see it. Lisa thinks pro wrestling is dumb, but because Bart is doing it, so she's making fun of him. But then Bart actually has to explain to Lisa like it's a lot like script writing. So Lisa ends up, trying it, and she gets better at Bart because she's better and she has more like playwriting experience. So Lisa's able to create actually like exciting matches because she's done this before, and so they end up having matches on the same show where they're competing against each other, but they don't wrestle each other differently.
Yeah. Which wrestlers do you think are, like, easily the most Simpsons-like in nature? Like,
Well, Danhausen.
yeah.
Of course, that's the obvious answer. Danhausen is a direct inspiration of all the Simpsons villains, kind of.
Yeah.
Danhausen and Mr. Burns are one and the same, I believe.
Yeah.
But I think in W there's a lot of characters that are so caricatural that they are pretty much Simpsons-esque. Like I think the well, the Undertaker was right out of the Treehouse of Horror episode.
Yeah.
But so Gene Snitsky, if you want, I think was the most Like, if you ask the Simpsons writers, who probably aren't very familiar with professional wrestling, to write in a professional wrestler, that's how he would end up, I think.
Oh yeah, like who would I put? Yeah, no, I think Snitsky's a great call. Like that, like a especially for like a one episode villain that shows up to town. Like the person in your episode who Bart would have to face, who Bart would be
Right.
training to face, would be Gene Snitsky.
Right?
So, finally, there is a game which I'm going to be playing with like everyone in different shows, which is tentatively titled "Book It," where people would have to come up with their champions for like their thing, like either television or movie they like. So a like sort of heavyweight champion, be it male or female, who like is basically the like either like the person that they think should be like the face of the show, or like the face of the show, the intercontinental champion, which is like the workman person, like the person who's sort of underrated in the show, who people should know more about, and the tag team champions are like the greatest group in the show.
Okay, so this is my caveat. I think I very much fall in the camp of the chase is much more exciting than the actual title reign, right?
Yeah.
So I think heavyweight champion would be Mr. Burns.
Yeah.
I think everyone wanting to see Mr. Burns go down is kind of very representative of what the Simpsons actually are doing, and I think the way, like, watching all the ploys that Mr. Burns would use to retain his title would be very interesting. As a Intercontinental Champion, how far back are we going? Are we going all seasons here?
All season you could do more. We can do like United States too if you want. You could do two of them if you want.
So let's go Lionel Hutz for Intercontinental Champion.
Yes.
Right? Pound for pound, the strongest jokes in The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Kind of a short reign, but pound for pound, for me, technically the best is how I would classify Lionel Hutz. And I think that's a great fit for Intercontinental Champion. And as far as tag team champions, going back to my theme of wanting the chase more than anything else, I'm going to go Lester and Eliza.
Oh.
Right? We can have that great feud between Lester and Eliza and Bart and Lisa in the big tag team championship match.
Yeah. Like I don't know, like I also see like Patty and Selma as the like all-time tag team, like two people who sort of like the Young Bucks who have stuck together all this time and like play off each other really, really well.
They are without a doubt one of the strongest pairs in The Simpsons.
Yeah.
They could do twin magic too.
Yeah. The Bella twins as
There
they
we
are. That would like also be an interesting episode of like if you like I feel like there are a lot of writers who are wrestling fans, like especially it's amazing the amount of like comedians and stuff I see at wrestling shows. So like I know like there are quite a few that are wrestling fans, but like if they do like a full on wrestling episode, I could definitely see like the Bella twins against Selma and Patty like in a match. Like if we're just booking like the ultimate like Simpsons almost celebrity death match.
That is some great fantasy booking right there.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end of episode 1 of Cheap Pop. Speedball, let the people know where they can see you, and all your socials and your Twitch.
I'm at Speedball Bailey on most platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I have a YouTube channel, Speedball Mike Bailey on YouTube, with vlogs and other videos, other assorted videos, mostly vlogs. And I am on Twitch, twitch.tv/SpeedballBailey, where we talk about everything and watch a lot of wrestling.
Yep. And you can find me at CartierNDG on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, at LJCartier514 on Twitch, and you catch me every Sunday on the Brunch Gimmick right here on the Love Wrestling YouTube. Also, a quick shout out to Christian Anagan Como, my friend, who gave me the song for the intro that played, and that's going to be playing during the outro. You can find his stuff at Christian No Relation, because apparently there's a whole other group with the name Christian on music sites that makes it hard for him to search for his name. So you can find his EP, Christian No Relation, on all the streaming sites on Bandcamp. Everyone should check it out. I thank him very much for the song. Speedball, thank you so much for talking about your love of The Simpsons and pro wrestling right here on Cheap Pop. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to talk Simpsons. Love the shirt, by the way. Didn't get the time to shout out a beautiful Veda Scott shirt. Thanks again so much.
I'm living the Cheap Pop gimmick. See? Everything. Literally soda, Cheap Pop on the shirt. Cheers, buddy. Again, thanks everyone for checking it out. I'll see you guys next week.